Hello, everyone, and welcome to this roundtable where we'll be discussing how to prepare for audit season with automation and AI. I'm your host, Megan Billingsley, and I'm happy to introduce our guests, three seasoned finance professionals who have all been through the trenches of audits themselves and will be sharing their expertise with you. I'm going to let Angela introduce herself first, and then we'll pass it to Kate, and then finally we'll hear from Sivan. Angela?
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela. I started out my finance career in banking and investing. And eventually, I realized I enjoyed the thrill of building and scaling finance operations at high growth startups. And I haven't looked back since, except maybe during audit seasons. Just kidding, of course. I had the opportunity to lead audit process at Winolo, a marketplace for flexible workforce. And most recently, I joined iDash, an AI SaaS platform for climate resilience, as its VP of Strategic Finance. I am happy to be here and share my 2 cents.
Great. Welcome, Angela. And Kate?
Hi, my name is Kate Reasons. I'm a CPA with a background in public audit from my time at KPMG Financial Services. And now I work in the technology sector and serve as the Director of Accounting and Operations. I was acquainted with Ledge when I worked with them at another fintech company that was focused with lending and payments. And now I work at a true SaaS and AI company called Rev, which is focused on helping the automotive industry really automate and step up their game because it has been historically quite antiquated, and we are helping them out.
Welcome. And Sivan?
Hi, I'm Sivan. In my previous roles, I served as senior auditor of tech companies at Ernst & Young. Then I spent the last 9 years as a finance leader at SimilarWeb, which is a B2B SaaS company. We took the company public back in 2021 in the New York Stock Exchange. And in my last role, I served as a VP of Finance, leading the financial and accounting functions in the company. Happy to be here today to share more about my audit experience and also about my IPO experience in relation to that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to share your expertise with us. It's incredible to have so much experience and knowledge all joined together at once in one virtual room. So we're heading into a time of year that tends to put a big ball of dread in the stomachs of many finance professionals, and that's audit season. Audits are never fun, but for businesses that are managing complex finance operations, they're especially difficult. Finance teams at these companies have to deal with an extremely high volume of transactions, a highly fragmented payment stack of data siloed across banks, PSPs, billing systems, databases, Excel sheets, and more. Sometimes complex flows of funds, including pay-ins and payouts, that can all make audits an absolute nightmare. Doing something as simple as piecing together a single transaction journey becomes a Herculean task that involves aggregating huge amounts of financial data across many different sources, managing Excel files that are so big they take 10 minutes to load, painstakingly piecing together and connecting the dots and accounting for any discrepancies. So today we're here to talk about how technology can make that all much easier for finance teams and how specifically automation and AI can play a role in simplifying audits. So Kate, you worked for years as an auditor yourself at KPMG before joining accounting teams in-house, meaning you've lived and breathed both sides of the audit equation. In your experience, what are the biggest challenges that finance teams face and that you personally faced when it comes to audits and audit prep?
I would say one of the biggest challenges that all teams face, including myself, is really carving out the time to be proactive. At KPMG, we called this accelerating the audit. And this means doing as much work as possible prior to the holidays in order to alleviate some pressure during the audit season. Typically that's going to be packed into Q1. The earliest you can get connected with your auditors, the better. Especially if you're a younger company, with a smaller accounting team, maybe you're only going through a private audit and it's your first year. The earlier you can get connected with your auditors, the better your relationship is going to be and the more that they can advise and help you. And then I would say also in dealing with competing priorities, a month close, internal or investor reporting, the audit can be challenging. And that's why leveraging tools anywhere you can to automate processes such as reconciliations, other reporting tools is really going to help you downstream when you start to get increasingly busy towards the end of Q4, beginning of Q1. And not only do these tools save time that can be reallocated to having these discussions with auditors, working with other teams when they need to provide audit evidence, but they can also provide excellent audit evidence and audit trail during substantive testing. For example, transaction data and ledge could assist with the substantiation of receipts from customers when testing revenue, or bank balances can be validated for alternative procedures if confirmations are unanswered. Or perhaps you use a tool like Brex or Ramp, which makes retrieval of receipts and invoices for testing OpEx much more convenient. Further, the controls in these tools may also support the entity's own control environment by providing out-of-the-box controls within their system should test of controls be involved in the audit they're undergoing.
Excellent. Now, Angela, you managed the audit during your time at Winolo, which is a fast-growing, high-volume marketplace. What surprised you most about your audit experience there? What challenges do you think are unique to marketplaces when it comes to preparing for and navigating audits?
Coming from the investing world, I used to think and take it for granted that, well, revenue is revenue, right? Honestly, now I laugh at myself. I couldn't have been more wrong. Marketplace is unique in that business goes through millions of transactions in any given day that can ultimately impact revenue. As you can imagine, revenue recognition was a key topic during our audit process at Winolo. One of our biggest challenges at the time was that we had so many different data stored across different systems. The team often spent hours trying to aggregate and reconciling data from multiple sources. And that includes Salesforce, Stripe, a homegrown internal system we had, and NetSuite, just to derive the most accurate information. Now, some of that data infrastructure, frankly, wasn't even built for finance use cases in the beginning. So as we were preparing for our first audit, we put a lot of efforts in establishing a single source of truth with reconfigured data inputs. Now, I completely understand that any fast-growing company, you're building the plane while flying, so there's really no perfect answer. If anything, I would advise any finance teams to take ownership of revenue inputs and invest in the processes and systems as early as possible.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And finally, Sivan, you have been through the audit process many times, including leading much of the process of taking SimilarWeb public. What were some of the biggest challenges that you confronted?
So I think my main challenge was really the volume of transactions. So we went public already having around $100 million in ARR. And so sampling volume for a company that has to follow PCAOB rules and at that size and much larger later, obviously, is really posing a challenge on the audit being completed while keeping the finance department also vacant to continue on its day-to-day operations. Working on such a large sample, whether it's revenue, expenses, other items, or balance sheet items, the requirement to provide a lot of material around every such sample means collecting data from multiple data sources, gathering it all together, making sure it aligns with other data pieces provided to the auditors, along with the rest of the work that needs to be done in the audit. This could really pose a risk to the finance team's ability to continue and complete its day-to-day tasks. Even the next month and close could be jeopardized by that. My team, being a lean one, especially during the IPO and even further on, had to juggle all of that, which was really probably the hardest task that we had to do. And I agree with Kate that the way to get it done is to start with a pre-audit early on in the year. So going into Q4, even at the end of Q3, taking whatever interim numbers you have and go from there to do most of the sampling and most of the audit. And then you're left with much less of the work towards Q1, which is obviously the busy season.
Excellent. Thank you. Kate, you have a ton of experience working specifically at fintechs. Based on what you know now, what systems and processes do you think are critical for fintechs in particular to have in place to more smoothly navigate audits?
Yep. So obviously time management and prioritization have already been mentioned several times in this call. And I would say specifically for Series A, Series B companies, when you're establishing processes and going through the audit at the same time, it's important to think about where the auditor's points of focus are. And auditors are typically going to review sets of GL lines in business processes. So I think it's first important to really hone in on those processes that are going to be important. So that's going to be, equity, revenue, cash, payroll, and then specific OpEx. So where you're spending the most. So for a lot of fintech companies, that's going to be your SaaS. And maybe you also have to talk about capitalized software. So knowing those primary topics, you should be prioritizing the systems that support the financial data for those processes. So you need bank reconciliations in place using a system like Ledge. You also have to have some sort of customer subledger to record, report, reconcile revenue and AR. That plays nicely with the product that Ledge provides. And I also highly recommend a system for expense management where you can enforce policy and receipt collection for OpEx test work, as well as a PEO like Rippling, Gusto, something like that with accounting integrations that can help you really rely on that system for the CNA of payroll and subsequent integration reporting into whatever accounting information system you're using. I would also say you really want to make sure that you have your lawyers and your board committed to a system in place for tracking and reporting your cap table using a tool like Carta, as well as a clear process for board approval for your stock-based compensation. A big topic in all of our audits, dating back to when I first started too, was just IPEs, or information produced by the entity. And if auditors determine that this information that you're producing, from these different platforms and tools or proprietary information that you're then reconciling using other tools, that can possibly reduce your additional test work. So when Sivan was talking about all of the volume of revenue testing, if you're able to collect information into a subledger, into a system that the audit team can determine is reliable, you might be able to alleviate a lot of the volume in your substantive testing, which really becomes the most time-consuming part of the audit. I also, last but not least, would say the thing that people forget working at these small, fast-moving companies when they're, focused on revenue, focused on cash, are entity level controls. ELCs are so easy to document, and they're incredibly important for setting the tone of the company in an audit. So if you have strong entity level control, it's a great way to start off your audit.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Now, Sivan, I read an article that you wrote where you said year-round, automate anything that you can automate. It'll change your life. Can you speak more about what you mean by that as it relates to audit prep?
Sure. So I think creating a proper infrastructure is one of the main roles that a finance executive needs to take on. This can be bringing in the right system into the company, such as ERP and billing, quote to cash, CRM, provisioning system, etc. But it also means getting other less sexy or maybe even non-mission critical tools, such as expense reimbursements, procurement system, cash reconciliation, or budget planning tools. In choosing those systems, the most important thing from my perspective when choosing those is more than just choosing the tool that suits your needs, but also make sure that it has the ability to integrate to other systems so that the data flow will be automatic. Otherwise, you'll find yourself ingesting the data from one system to another or trying to reconcile data all manually, which can lead to significant time wasted, but also errors that will backfire during the audit, and you don't want to find yourself making all that corrections to your financial statements because you don't have completeness of data or because you had things being entered manually because you don't have integrations between your systems. So I think really creating the proper infrastructure early on and not wait until you're 50 million ARR is probably one of the first things I would prioritize walking into a finance department.
Excellent. Thank you. Angela, while Sivan and Kate here have strong accounting backgrounds, you bring a different perspective as someone with a background in strategic finance. How do you think your strategic finance leadership experience has informed your experience navigating more technical processes such as audits?
Kate talked about, reliability of information earlier. And as a strategic finance leader, I see the world through the lens of financial statements. And what I mean by that, even though I live and breathe the details of financial data every day, I know there's a customer and a stakeholder behind every single number. And I'm always connecting the dots between what's happening in the field with sales or product to how they eventually show up on our financial statements at the single GL level. And that level of understanding helps us build the most accurate representation of our financial records. And by the time we're in the audit process of Winolo, we can confidently explain everything from our cost allocation methodology to revenue treatments. To me, audit is not just a check the box exercise, especially coming from the outside. To me, it's not just going down a long PBC list and here's the must do's, but it's more of an external mirror, if you will, someone else holds up for you to help you validate the integrity and excellence of how a business operates. And that's how I think about the audit process.
Well said. Thank you. Okay, so switching gears a bit now, everyone's talking about AI these days, and it can be hard to figure out what's real and what's just hype. But it seems like with finance, where you're dealing with very repetitive, time-consuming tasks, there really is some super exciting potential for AI here. Sivan, what do you think the biggest opportunities are for AI in finance these days?
So I think that finance operations today entails a lot of manual work, and that AI is just now kicking in. We do need to separate AI and generative AI, though. I feel AI is something that can solve a lot of the manual overload that we have today. I believe AI will be more and more present in the mundane finance operations, such as invoice entry, reconciliation of accounts, and data across different sources, etc. Generative AI, on the other hand, is something that I feel is still in its diapers, but could have a much larger effect, not only on the workload, but also on the quality. It can potentially improve the ability to provide better forecasts that are based on companies' history. But the major deal here is the ability to take into account assumptions to reflect any potential known or unknown impacts that cannot be accounted for looking only at the company's history. So I think that's where we're still kind of learning and understanding how we can implement generative AI into our ability to provide better forecasts, to make better sensitivity checks, to be able to have a better understanding of what the future holds and not just base it off of what we already know.
Perfect. Thank you. Kate, what's your perspective on leveraging new technologies in finance? What are your thoughts about AI?
I am always game for a new tool as long as it, meets the needs of the company and there's budget for it. Teams are becoming increasingly leaner. When you're at a Series A, Series B, a growing company, your headcount of your accounting and finance team might not be very large. And while you're dedicating a bunch of your budget to grow the company by, ramping up the go-to-market team, investing in product and engineering, you really have to be scrappy about how you're running your internal teams, and where you might lack in some additional headcount, you can make up with for an automation. And, I am always a firm believer, AI is never going to replace accountants. There's always going to need to be a reviewer. There's always going to be a decision maker. Even if we start to use generative AI, there's going to have to be someone who steps in to evaluate, all the inputs and assumptions that are being used. But as far as machine learning goes, as far as for matching transactions, you see that in a lot of tools like Ledge. A certain transaction comes through enough time, and then the system can then recognize that. That's great because it's kind of like you're teaching an employee. One time you teach them one time, you go over the transaction a few times, and then you can step away and you can focus on more strategic tasks and be the business partner you want to be to your C-suite and really focus on relationships with external parties like auditors and investors.
Excellent. Thank you. And Angela, do you have any thoughts or a perspective to share on this?
I echo a lot of what Kate and Sivan already said. I think the CFO tech stack historically hasn't seen the same level of innovation as sales or engineering tools. Only recently, I think we're starting to see a new wave of automation AI-enabled tools that are solving finance team challenges. And I've seen, everything from procurement to month-end closing to budget planning being really automated and tool-enabled. So I'm excited to see how we can adopt new tools to help us be more strategic with our time. I think one thing, as having spent last decade in finance, I know finance professionals love their Excels. To the extent as a leader, you can encourage and train teams to experiment and try new things. It's something I will continue to do with my team.
Excellent. Well, our time is beginning to wrap up here. So I think to end things, I'm going to ask you, to a finance professional that's going into a big, challenging audit for the first time, what's the number one piece of advice you would give them? Angela, we'll start with you.
That's a good question. I think treat audit not as a single major event, but a work style, if you will. As you're writing, new policies or implementing a new system, ask yourself the same questions as auditors might ask you down the line, and that hopefully will make the actual audit season a bit more manageable.
Beautiful. Sivan, we'll go to you next.
So my one advice is to go ahead and start planning and executing now. Yes, I know it's just the end of Q3, but this will be key in your ability to survive the audit season and not go on overnights day in, day out. Sit with your auditors, put together a timeline and a plan, do a pre-audit based on interim figures, take on a lot of the sampling now rather than later, build templates for working papers and populate them so that all you have to do is roll forward when the year end comes. Collect documentation and centralize all data in one location. There's so much you can do now to make everyone's lives better during the audit and to really spread out the extensive amount of work throughout the longer period.
Wonderful. And we'll close with Kate.
Oh, I would say my number one piece of advice is the same, but I'm going to give a different a different answer, just so we cover multiple points. So I would say, as you're stepping into Q4 and Q1 and everything's getting busy, it's easy to get distracted and a little bit overwhelmed with all the items that you're juggling. But it's important to remember that steps that you take and investments that you make into automation causes a ripple effect. Once you allocate the time and really invest in automating one thing, you then have more time freed up to go on to the next and the next and the next. And all you have to do is, take that first step, and you will see tangible results when you go into the audit season. And you will also see results in the form of time saved. So, you can serve your team better, you can perform better, and really take your company and its finance department to the next level.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Angela, Sivan, and Kate, for that insightful discussion on leveraging automation and AI to prepare for audit season. It's clear that staying audit ready year-round is becoming increasingly crucial for finance teams. Speaking of being always audit ready, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Ledge. Their powerful platform aligns perfectly with what we've discussed today. Ledge's powerful automated reconciliation engine empowers finance teams to trace every single transaction or invoice in real time, essentially allowing you to be audit ready at any moment. As we've heard from our experts, this kind of real-time visibility is invaluable when it comes to navigating audits. If you're interested in exploring how Ledge can help your team stay ahead of the curve and always be audit ready, I encourage you to check out their website for more information, ledge.co. Once again, thank you to our speakers and to all of you for joining us today. We hope you found this webinar on preparing for audit season with automation and AI both informative and practical for your own finance operations. Have a great day.